Hi, my name is May, and today I'm going to be talking to you about finding your voice. Now, growing up, we're told, don't sit like that, don't talk like that, don't laugh so loud, don't wear that. Have any of you ever felt like you were told off for not acting appropriately? I think we're all too familiar with being told what not to do rather than open us to what we're capable of doing. I was meant to be in front of a mic. Here's me at the age of around 5 or 6 years old. I've still got a mic in front of me even now. When I was in school, I was pretty much the goofball of the class. I never cared about being the prettiest or the coolest, and I hated groupism in class. And I don't mean in the context of having a small group of close friends, but forming groups that created hierarchy. I hated that. I talked to everyone, and it was important to me that people shouldn't ever be afraid of talking to me. I realized the impact of this at around 17 or 18 years old during my last couple of years of boarding school. I arrived a few weeks late to join school because I had some medical issues that I was recovering from. When I got to class, everyone had already found their places to sit. I was the last one, and I saw that the first table at the top of class was free, so I sat next to my new classmate, Devdutt. He was very tall, kind, respectful, a little awkward, but we instantly bonded over our obsession with movies. And standard procedure in school, if you're a girl who sat next to a boy voluntarily, you were then teased with them for the rest of your school life. Ooh, Devdutt is your boyfriend. Now, this can be embarrassing and uncomfortable, and it really isn't about whether Devdutt or I actually fancied each other. We were just classmates and friends, and whether he liked me or not didn't really matter. The one thing that did matter was that I never wanted him to feel lesser than. So, for example, someone would tease us saying something like, ooh, you and Devdutt sitting in a tree. And instead of my reaction being like, oh, I don't like Devdutt, or oh, not him, or ew, or like sort of flinch and move away from him, I would just put my arm in his and I'd be like, so what? What's your problem? Eh? And in that moment, I hope that Devdutt would never feel like he was being rejected, but instead feel accepted. These were the moments where your voice and how you treat people really mattered. Now, as you can tell from the way I speak, I have a very warped and strange accent. It's not Indian, it's not American, it's not Malayali. It's not anything specific and seems to be a hodgepodge of different influences. I was born in Kerala, raised partly in Bombay, partly in the Middle East, and was then in boarding school in India, and then was in the UK for 6 years during my college and work years, and then I came back to India. I learned a phrase that I felt really perfectly explains where I come from. I'm a third culture kid. It means when you grow up in a culture that's not the original culture you're from. I have been made fun of so much because of my accent. Oh, did you pick up your accent from the airport? Things like that. It's funny, but not funny. But I eventually realized that my accent was my strength and gave me the ability to crack a better joke about my accent than anyone else could. For example, Ranganathan and I are going to stroll after a very heavy buffet lunch. I need a little exercise to get the bowels in motion. Or, Jonathan has conveniently gone to buy vegetables, but I know that he is simply going to the toddy shop. As you can tell, I've honed my voice for a living. I was a radio journalist, a presenter, a voiceover artist, and now a podcaster and podcast producer. And it's through using my voice that I understood how what you say and what you don't say affects people. I also learned how to find creative ways of articulating my thoughts and my feelings through the audio medium in the best way that I knew how, that was authentic to me. I run an indie music podcast called Made in India. That's spelled M-A-E-D, derived from my name, Mae, which is spelled M-A-E. I started it a little over 6 years ago, and my mission was music discovery. I grew up listening to the radio on my boombox that my mother gave me, and I would record songs off the radio onto blank cassettes. And my podcast was a way of rekindling that spark when you find a really cool new song. So Made in India was always about music discovery, and you had a chance to listen to a singer-songwriter from Kochi, or a rapper from Kashmir, or a punk band from Shillong. Then when the pandemic hit and India went into lockdown in March 2020, it was the worst time in our living history. And sadly, instead of everyone coming together to support one another, our country was bickering with those across our borders. I felt disillusioned and it was upsetting. So I decided to do something different on Independence Day. Usually running an indie podcast, most of the time people are celebrating independent India with independent music. And I wanted to do that, but differently. I created something called Our Neighbors. It was a chance for me to celebrate independent music from our neighboring countries. And I featured artists from Pakistan, from Sri Lanka, Bangladesh, and Nepal. I wanted to shift the conversation from patriotism to compassion and camaraderie. You know that saying, knowledge is power? It sounds cheesy, but it's true. Though I don't know how much power I have, but the only way to learn how to find your voice is to know how to. In 2009, I was working as a news journalist for a community radio station in Wales called Newport City Radio. There was one time in the year where our online station would apply for a short-term restricted radio license to broadcast for about a month. The radio manager at the time was a smiley, warm, kind-eyed Welshman called Ian Lansdale. When we got permission for the FM broadcast, we all got ready. Ian picked me up, and I looked at the back of his car and saw this tangled mess of metal rods all stuck together. I asked him what that was, and he said that it was the radio antenna. We were heading to the highest pub in the area to climb to the top and attach the radio antenna so that we could broadcast from our studio to a particular frequency for people to hear us on radio waves. That was my first time setting up a radio signal. Now, coming back to India and working at 94.3 Radio 1 in Bombay as a radio presenter hosting the afternoon request show, I used to talk to our tech team a lot. Sushant, Praveen, as well as our CTO, Nisar Bhai. They told me about all the radio towers in Bombay, where they're located, why, which towers are used by which radio stations, or what happens when the studio broadcast cuts out, and how do you continue to play music so that the frequency isn't playing dead air or radio silence. I was the only presenter at that time who knew how to convert the on-air live studio into a recording studio. Then started my own podcast company in 2018, and I wanted to know how to distribute a podcast. How do I create an RSS feed and make sure that the show is available on all podcast apps like Spotify, JioSaavn, Apple, Castbox, Overcast? I'd previously worked with a wonderful tech guy called Kunwar Anand, who I called and asked for his advice, and he was kind enough to help me every step of the way. That's where I learned that asking questions, being curious, and sharing knowledge can build your confidence in what you know. I'm not an expert, but I surround myself with expert opinions that I trust and value. I, by the way, am not a qualified audio engineer, and yet I run a podcast production company and consultancy where I've taken shows from idea to production to distribution, all because of working with people who have the expertise that I don't. I'm only one human being, and I cannot be expected to know everything. But I have to be able to know what I want to say. And I can tell you that there are 3 things that have helped me do that. 1, trust your gut. We're so used to suppressing our better judgment through most of our lives because we have to fit into this box that isn't our own making. So I've really learned to talk to my gut and listen and trust. And you don't always have to know the answer or know what to do. You can take your time and decide, and even if you don't, another opportunity will come your way eventually. Number 2, if you have an idea, do it. I have had so many people not like my ideas. I've had my own partner tell me, why do you want to do this idea if no one believes in it? Just because other people don't see your vision doesn't mean it's not worth doing. Even if you have to invest your own money and resources into it, or beg for favors, or ask friends to help you, you'll feel better that you made your idea a reality. Lastly, surround yourself with people who believe in you. They'll be your biggest cheerleaders. And even if they're your biggest critics, they will at least tell you in a way that doesn't hurt you. I've been so lucky to have people that have been able to teach me and help me realize my ideas. Finding your voice, it isn't about just speaking. It's about being you, and to be you and be proud of that. Thank you.